Well, hello everybody, and welcome to another rowing chat. I'm Rebecca Caro, and this is the headline podcast on the Rowing Chat Podcast Network. We're a network of different shows, and we have lots of different voices. If you would like to be a podcaster or be a guest, please get in touch. Our website is rowing.chat. Now, before I introduce my guest today, we have some sponsors' messages. I would very much like Rowing Chat to be able to help rowing retailers recover from the COVID-19 situation. And to this end, what I want to do is to build a gigantic web page that lists all the different rowing businesses that are out there. And I need you to help me to do this. I'd like to feature as many as possible. So can you send me your favorite rowing product and a web link so that I can approach the business and see if they'd like to be on the page? You can do this through our website, rowing.chat. You can tweet me at Rebecca Caro. You can Facebook me. I'm reasonably easy to find. Now, Blake Gourlay's book is still available for purchase at a special discount of 30%. It's called The Movement of Rowing, and it explains how movement limitations in your foot and ankle can affect your performance. You can get self-test strategies. There are 11 chapters. It explains what solutions there are once you've done your tests. So if you're a coach, you should be reading this for your athletes. If you're athletes, of course, you can read it for yourself. The discount coupon is Rowing Chat, and you can find the link on our sponsors page, rowing.chat/sponsors. Now, my guest today is Kristin Hedstrom. Kristin, welcome to your first Rowing Chat.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
Now, tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and your personal background in the sport of rowing.
Yeah, I came from a non-athlete as a child. I tried every sport out there and hated them all. Thought I would never be an athlete in my life until I found rowing. And I started rowing when I was about 14, 15. And that kicked off a 15-year career. I rowed through high school, in college here in the US, and then for Team USA for the next 7 years beyond college, racing at World Cups and World Championships and the 2012 Olympic Games as a lightweight rower.
Now, lightweights is a theme that I really like to develop during our chat today because you're also a professional sports instructor. So tell me a bit about your professional background.
Yeah, after I retired from elite competition, I had already begun a career in personal training and fitness training for women. And I found that I not only really drew from my background as an athlete and all the physical pieces of it, but also very much the lightweight piece of it. And so I started helping women with weight loss and found incredible success helping women, non-rowers, just regular women, but also I worked with a fair amount of rowers as well with weight loss. And for some of the rowers, a lot of them are lightweights. And so I work with a lot of lightweights at this point too. And then that sort of grew to a part of my business. I run my own business, and that grew to a part of the business where I now help all rowers. I've worked with many masters and many juniors, mainly with helping them get their 2K scores to be faster. I help a lot of lightweights manage the weigh-in process and be a lot smarter with that. And then training plans. I've got a few different training plans for athletes who need a little more guidance, whether that's on a winter break from school if they're in high school or college, or they want to get a faster 2K. I've got training plans that will give them really a day-by-day instruction on what workouts to do to get them there.
Wow, that sounds amazing. So let's kick off with the big question. When you're trying to get a personal best or a personal record on a 2K, how do you approach pacing it?
Such a great question. So the way I like to think about this is in order to understand how to pace your 2K correctly, you have to understand what not to do, right? How it happens if you end up pacing your 2K incorrectly. And this is something that a lot of rowers can identify with, because when we first started, none of us knew what we were doing, right? We had no clue what this 2K was. All that happened is that a coach said, okay, set your monitor for 2,000 meters, attention, go. And we pulled as hard as we could. And then about 500 meters in, or maybe 750 meters in, it all went downhill, right? It's the classic fly and die, right? You go out really hard. There's a lot of adrenaline, and what ends up happening from a physiological standpoint is that your body gets flooded with lactic acid, and you can't manage it, and it's mentally a lot more challenging to do it that way too. And so the third 500 is basically a sufferfest where the splits go way up, and it's super painful. And then when you get to the last 500, you start to recognize that the end is near. And so there's usually a last little sprint that happens toward the end, where athletes can bring it down a little bit. So this is the classic way to start, right? With a 2K. And it's, in some ways, coaches can tell you not to do that, but each rower usually has to learn for themselves. I know I was one of these rowers who was just abysmal on the first 2K. And so then I think, since that's the starting point for many athletes, at least something that they can identify with, then it's a matter of teaching them, okay, if that's the incorrect way to do it, the way that produces a lot of pain, mental pain, physical pain, then what's the way that we can do it that's a lot more strategic in the way that you're going about it? And so the way that I start, and I do a lot of coaching with rowers on their 2Ks specifically, the way I like to start with them is really teaching them why you want to pace your 2K the way you do. And the ideal way to pace your 2K is really doing your start 5, your high 10 or 15 in the beginning, and then you're shifting to a pace that you're going to hold for really the majority of the piece, right? You might go up or down with a little bit of variation between a couple of splits, but really you want to be very consistent through the middle of your 2K. And then you want to get a little bit faster, obviously, as you get to the sprint. So the thing that I like to start with these athletes is talking about why you want to do that, right? And so really a lot of this is driven by lactic acid production and therefore amount of pain. And so whereas the original idea was, okay, I feel a ton of adrenaline, I'm feeling great at the beginning, I'm going to go as fast as I can and then totally die. Really, the thing that we want to think more about is, okay, do the first maybe 25 to 30 strokes harder, and then be disciplined enough as an athlete to get right to your pace, stay at your pace. And that's something that comes with practice over, steady state rows and pieces throughout practice, being really consistent, and then starting to bring it down in the last 500. But that way, there's not such a huge spike in the third 500. It stays really very consistent through there.
So imagine you're working with an athlete who's done 1, maybe 2, maybe 3 2Ks. Do you start by setting that target, we'll call it the mid-race pace, even though we know it's most of the race pace? Do you set that target as being a split that they've already achieved with their fly and die strategy, or do you go a little harder?
Yeah, that's a great question. It really depends on the athlete. I was working with an athlete on Friday. We had a one-on-one coaching call about this, and she started rowing 6 months ago. She's a high schooler. And so it really depends on the athlete. Is she an athlete who has experience with athletics in another arena, like swimming, where this is a familiar thing? Is she getting a lot faster? Is she confident about her ability to do this, or does she really, this is brand new to her, that she's never paced anything in her entire life? If it's an athlete that's new to athletics, like I was when I really started rowing, right? I'd never paced anything correctly in my life before, then I would go a little bit slower so that you can build the confidence knowing that you can actually hold those splits, versus an athlete who, a couple of the junior athletes I work with are coming straight out of 3 years of swimming. They're really from, I talk about splits and pacing and they're like, totally get it. And they know how to push their bodies in that way. And so then I would say, I'd be careful. I wouldn't go too much faster, but then, yeah, I would go a little bit faster than what they've been able to do for averages, I should say.
Yeah. Now let's talk about what happens when you slip off that target. Say you're off by 1 to 2 seconds. What are the mental and physical tactics that you recommend?
Yes, there is always a point in a 2K where your mental and therefore your physical approach can go one of two ways. It's kind of like a fork in the road. I like to think a bit about it. If your mental thoughts are about here, and then you get to this moment where they start to dip down, you start to think, oh, this is really hard. Oh, my legs hurt. Oh my gosh, there's so much left. I don't know why I thought I could do this for a 2K. I probably can't do this for a 2K. And if you're able to catch yourself thinking about those and then create a positive thought as the next thought that you think, and then start to kind of like shift your thinking to that, then you tend to see a really good result. Whereas if you meet that moment and go further down into the depths, and that happens by default, right? Because our minds are there to keep us alive. That will happen by default. And if that happens, then it tends to not go well, right? The third 500 or whenever that moment comes tends to be really not fun. So I think that, again, this is something that can very much be honed during practices and during harder pieces. But I think it really starts for athletes with an awareness of what they're thinking. So a lot of what I work with athletes on when we start to talk about mental toughness is, okay, I just want you to list out what your thoughts are. Like, go do a hard erg test, or not even a test, but just pieces on the erg, do some 500s. And by about the fourth or fifth 500, what are you thinking? Is your mind in a positive place? Is it in a really negative place? What are those thoughts? Let's put those thoughts on paper so that we at least start to get an idea of like where your mind goes. And then you start to think about your thoughts as if you're standing outside of yourself, rather than just being a victim and thinking, oh my gosh, these are just my thoughts. That's what it is. I have no control.
And so physical strategies now, because it's not just the mental, is it?
Yeah. Yes. Physical strategies when the 2K starts to get really challenging. The biggest thing that I started with when I was 2K testing was to focus on the rate, because the stroke rate tends to dip when you are starting to feel tired. If let's say you were at a base pace of 31 in the second 500, then it kind of slips in the third 500 to 30 or maybe 29. And a lot of times, if we're not even focused on the rate, if we aren't even looking at that, we have no idea. I find that a lot of athletes, I ask them to fill out their 500-meter splits and rates. And I see that so often. And I point it out and I say, hey, look, you went to a 29 in that third 500. And they say, oh, yeah, I did. Look at that. It's like no sense of it. So to me, the first thing really the simplest thing to work on is keeping your rate high. And I would do that by getting your hands quickly around the catch and quickly around the finish, two parts of the stroke where we tend to hesitate. And then that's really what makes the stroke rate go down.
That's a great strategy. So now I'm just going to shift on to talking about being a lightweight. So I've never been a lightweight. What are the things that in your professional career, when you were being a full-time athlete, do you believe contribute to making a successful lightweight rower?
Yeah. Oh, lightweight rowing. Okay. So this is something that coaches often turn a blind eye to because they don't really know how to approach it. And so I think that that's the first place to start, is from the coach's perspective. We need to get a little bit more education around the coaches. And I had pretty good coaches that were teaching me some of this, but I think a lot of it also comes from experience. So here's what I'll share as far as what really worked for me and what works for a lot of the lightweights that I work with now. The first is really creating a plan for yourself. So this is something that will serve you well, not only in the 2Ks we were just talking about, but also when it comes to a weigh-in. You really don't want to get to arrive at the regatta. You've got maybe a day or two until your weigh-in, and you really don't want to do the fingers crossed method, which is, okay, I'm just going to show up on the morning of the weigh-in or wake up the morning of the weigh-in and really hope that I'm at weight. And if I'm not, I'll just kind of deal with it then. Not a great strategy. Weighing in takes planning, and it really takes a lot of preparation because you have practiced doing these different things. So if we think
that's a key word, isn't it?
Yeah,
that
exactly.
Is so key. Practice.
Yes. Yeah. And that's right. That's the same thing as 2King. If you just show up on the erg and the coach says, set your monitor for 2000 meters and you're doing the fingers crossed strategy again, I'll tell you right now, it's not going to go very well for you. Same thing with weighing in. So what I would suggest for lightweights who are either starting out with rowing lightweight or who have rowed lightweight, but maybe want to hone their skills a little bit, is I would really start to create a calendar first off. So you really have to work backwards from the date of the weigh-in, right? If the weigh-in, let's say, is on May 31st, right? Then you've got to work back. And I usually suggest working back 8 weeks from there. And so then you're at the beginning of April. And you've got to figure out what you weigh now in the morning, if you're weighing in the morning, and then what you need to weigh for the race. So you need to look up what the weight limit is. And then take that difference, right? How much you have to lose, and then divide it by 8. And that's how much weight you have to lose each week. Can you lose the last pound, in the week prior, or even, the day or two prior? Yeah, that's okay based on hydration. But I would at least put that calendar together so that if you're not quite on the path to getting there, you've got a little bit of wiggle room at the very end. So that's where I would start, is creating this calendar. And then it's really for lightweights around building healthier habits around their eating. A lot of athletes don't feel themselves particularly well. And so it's about then using that framework of, this is how much weight I need to lose each week. And this is how much I need to weigh, on each, let's say it's a Monday, every week that you're weighing in. This is how much I need to weigh every Monday. So you really have that feedback on a weekly basis leading up to it, rather than just showing up and saying, all right, let's see if this works.
When you were racing professionally, how close to your race weight did you train at? Were you like within 2 or 3 pounds?
Yeah, I really ran the gamut on that. When I was in high school and college, I was always heavier by a couple pounds. Never trained more than 5 pounds over what I was. I should say too, I was always a really small lightweight. So I was
going to ask you, what was your target weight?
Yeah. So when I was racing in high school and college, the weight limit was 130 pounds. I would usually sit, earlier in my career, a little heavier than that. Later in my college career, right around 128. And then when I started racing on the elite level, the big advantage that I had was that, and for those who don't know, when you're racing at the elite level, you actually have to average your weights between the teammates. So I was racing in the lightweight double most often, which meant that my partner and I had to average our weights at 125 pounds. So my big advantage was, okay, you're smaller to begin with. That means you get to be the weight maker, we call it. And so get down even lower. So I was, when I was racing at the Olympics and the years beyond, I weighed in anywhere from 121 to 123 for the actual weigh-in. And then I would train a few pounds heavier than that.
But you were still on that sort of typical 8-week plan.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is so interesting. So did you ever have a training buddy that you shared this information with, or was it very personal and private?
When I'm racing for a weigh-in that everyone is just kind of on their own, like each person just has to be 130 pounds, then it was more private. But I did go to a college where they would weigh us in at random I think it was 3 times a week. Every morning we would go up to the weigh-in and we would wait around. And if someone came in to weigh us, then we would have that weigh-in recorded. And if they didn't, then we wouldn't have that recorded. But every morning we would go up to the scale and just hang out for a few minutes to see if it was a weigh-in day. That's how they kept it a surprise. And for that reason, it wasn't necessarily that my teammates knew how much I was weighing in, but the coaches and the sports medicine knew how much I was. And then we had guidelines on averages that we had to hit throughout the fall season and the winter season in order to be eligible to race lightweight.
And then great. And that's designed to prevent people crash dieting, isn't it?
Yeah. They were pretty strict. We had to average, I think, under 133 pounds through the winter, which meant that we were pretty close to our weigh-ins. Yeah. I think a lot of lightweight rowing gets a very bad rap because there are lightweights that lose a lot of weight. And to be honest, they can be successful, right? We've seen Olympic athletes who are racing lightweight actually do well with that, but it's not something that we want to have as lifelong habits whatsoever. And I will say it does not make the athletes who are doing that necessarily healthy for the rest of their lives. So.
Well, exactly. And of course, unfortunately, the horror stories make wonderful stories. So people want to talk about Ian Watson, who was 6'2" and only ate boiled sweets in the week before the regatta. Well, that sounds, awesome and crazy and ambitious, and I can't help but think that really wasn't a very healthy way to present and portray lightweight rowing.
I absolutely agree. And I always think it's such a shame, at least in the US, they're constantly talking about getting rid of lightweight rowing at the junior level. And I constantly just think that's such a shame. There's so much opportunity for athletes that are smaller if we knew how to manage that and manage them with their weigh-in. And there's such a smarter way to do it. It's just people don't share the information around on a grand scale, or they don't know, so there's no way for coaches to really inform their athletes.
Yeah, so one of my very earliest interviewees was a lady called Chelsea Dommett, who was a university coxswain in America. And we got in touch because she was a walk-on. She learned to cox at her university. And she said, I was so frustrated by the time I'd done a couple of years because I realized that the coach did not know how to coach a coxswain. Mm-hmm. They just didn't. And I'm sensing you're telling me the same thing. Coaches don't know how to coach lightweights as an entirety, everything around the lightweight, not just how to handle an oar and row a boat. So if you were, I'm giving you a magic wand now, Kristin. Your magic wand, what are the 2 things that you'd like every coach to learn?
Oh man. I wish coaches knew that it doesn't have to be a fully negative situation. I wish coaches knew that there was a systematic way to lose weight, and that if the athletes followed the systematic way by eating healthier, they actually might even go faster while they're losing weight. Many lightweights do end up going faster while they're losing weight. And they're going to eat a heck of a lot better if they're doing it the correct way, right? They're going to eat a heck of a lot better than maybe even some of the heavyweights on the team, likely some of the heavyweights on the team.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a big one.
And the second?
The second would be, I wish coaches knew that it's an opportunity for athletes to get to know their bodies and thrive in a sport that is typically only reserved for bigger athletes, really tall athletes. Through the lightweight process, you can not only be really competitive, but you can learn a lot about how your weight affects, you in different ways, right? Do you lose weight when you sleep? And if so, how much? Do you gain weight when you eat out? These are skills that are lifelong skills as far as being able to put together a healthy set of habits. But many coaches just kind of, they, like you said, they kind of follow the horror stories that we've got out there. And I think it's really too bad. I think that if we all did it correctly, then maybe we'd even be getting more of the heavyweights on board to say, hey, maybe it would be helpful to follow some of these, healthier eating guidelines.
It's really interesting what you're saying about the lifelong habits. Years ago, I read a book about why French women don't get fat, which is just, a clickbait headline. But its basic principle was really clear. Firstly, understand portion size. What does 300 grams of lean meat look like on a plate when it is cooked? Do you know, is it this size or is it this size?
Right.
And then secondly, they advocated weighing in every morning and then deciding what to eat during that day based on what you weighed that morning. And then over the top of that, you overlay all the other little bits of information. Am I stressed? Am I having my period? Am I, 101 things. Is it winter? Is it summer? How do I feel? And that lifelong habit has stayed with me personally. I'm not saying that I'm a great weight. I weigh more than I used to when I was younger, but I know where I am, and it at least gives me the feeling of control. And if I want to make a change, I know what I need to do.
Yes, so true.
Do you still weigh in every day?
I don't weigh in every day. I have, from my lightweight rowing years, have probably the fanciest scale you've ever seen. From the, just getting so exact with it, which I still have in my bathroom. I weigh myself probably once a week now.
Mm-hmm. And based on that, talk us through your personal habit. You're not competing anymore. You're just being a normal person living a healthy lifestyle. So once a week you weigh in. What does it tell you, and what do you do as a result?
I love that you say, what does it tell you? Because that's something that I think many women in general, they don't see it as what does that tell you as far as information is concerned. It's more, what is my worth? And I think that that's a big thing to make a change with. And certainly something that I learned as a lightweight is it's just information, right? It's just giving you feedback on how you're doing with your eating, with your exercise, with your hydration, with all of your habits. It's just a number that, if that number is a little higher or a little lower, it's just giving you information about, how to make little tweaks. So when I was a lightweight rower, I was weighing in every single morning. And when it got close to the weigh-in, I was weighing in every single morning and every single evening so that I could see the changes in how much I weighed between the night of sleep, and just keeping all of that, keeping track of all of that. Nowadays, I am much more loose about it. I'm not sitting here being super strict about it anymore. But if I see a weight that's maybe a little bit higher than normal, then that's feedback for me, right? Then I start to say, okay, yeah, that kind of makes sense, because I had a birthday party I went to, or I traveled for a week and was totally out of my routine, or I haven't been, as diligent about doing my full workout. Maybe I cut it short because I had a little injury that was nagging me or something like that, and it starts to feed into this number in a way that I see it and I think, oh, that's really helpful, right? Okay, that means I need to just kind of course correct. What it's kind of like is when we're talking about the 2K pacing, and it's like the moment where things start to go down and you are able to save it, right? It's like this information can, right? Because people, after working with many women who are working on big weight loss, right? Non-rowers, it doesn't happen overnight, right? Weight gain happens over many years. And so it's just a weekly weigh-in is a great way to just check in and say, okay, where am I at? What little tweaks do I need to make to get myself back on track?
Yeah. And also psychologically, it's lots of very small bits of pressure rather than one massive weight that says, oh my God, you weigh this,
Yeah.
So like, well, I like your point about these are small bits of data that you can just assess. And interestingly, I think that's a big part of female psychology. When I am coaching women, the concept of having the angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other shoulder, and your self-talk, and you have positive and negative.
Oh, yeah.
I find that women have an incredible ability to talk themselves down, and they have to be educated about how to observe their own movement and decide whether it fits a pattern that you want or a pattern that you don't want, and then make a change without making a value judgment.
Yeah.
And adults look at me with surprise. They did not know that it was possible. I was going, you want to imagine yourself as a scientist, in a white coat in a lab, and you're just saying, is this what we want? Yes, carry on. No, make a small change. And they kind of look at me like they think I'm the daft one. And then they get out in the boat, and you realize, you can tell when someone is self-coaching a negative spiral. You can see it on their face.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. And I think it speaks to the difference in reaction between those two, speaks to whether you stay in a mode of action versus kind of a mode of victim, right? If you're looking at the number and you're saying, okay, well, this is giving me some data and I now know what I need to change. Well, your mind is already in action mode. Okay, this is what I need to tweak, or I'm good. I don't need to change anything, versus this overwhelming feeling of this is my self-worth. Well, then it gets you into like such a victim mentality, right? You just start thinking about all these things that you did wrong and that happened to you. And it's like, you're no longer in a mindset of what can I do from here?
I do think there are some boundary lines which are quite grey. And one of the things that on a team sport a coach can encourage is collaboration in support of each other. So this isn't like a moan fest where you go, oh, this happened, and people listen to you. It comes very much from that book, Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus. And I've had male and female friends who react in very similar ways. You can tell they want to talk about something. And I have developed a phrase, which is, Kristin, do you just want me to listen to what you've got to say? Because that's fine. Or would you like me to help you get a solution?
That's great.
And I had a particularly needy friend who was going through some emotional problems with a relationship that had ended. And she used to ring me really regularly. And I didn't mind, because we are friends and I'm trying to be supportive and recognize that, she needs help. But when I confronted her with this, would you just like me to listen to what you have to say? Or actually, are you seeking solutions? It was in actual fact too much, and she ran away. She found someone else who she could just ring and moan at. She didn't want to face the fact that she had to decide whether she wanted to make a change or just have someone listen. And I didn't realize at the time that obviously that was really hard for her. But I thought I was being helpful because I was very happy just to be a listener. But she didn't want me in that mode.
Yeah.
And I think coaches can help a team or a crew help each other by suggesting ways that they can support each other off the water, usually. And that support could be, it's not, lightweight rowing isn't just about weighing in, is it? There's a lot more to it, but the other bits of rowing are a little bit more shared with other teams. So what are your sort of top tips for team support?
Oh, that's great. Yeah. I think that it's so important to know what's helpful for you as a person. And so much of what we've talked about tonight is just knowing yourself, right? Knowing what, from the 2K pacing and what your mindset is and what your thoughts are, to the weigh-ins, and knowing how your body, reacts under certain circumstances as far as your weigh-ins are concerned. And then to this, having knowing yourself as an athlete, are there things that teammates or coaches can say that make you feel absolutely terrible? Or are there things they say that really help you? My top tip as far as interacting with other teammates is concerned is to always frame it in the positive. If you give another athlete, a teammate, a compliment about something they're doing really well, then their chances are they're going to do more of that. If you tell someone what they're doing wrong, then it's not going to give you the same results. And I rode in a lot of 2-person boats, a lot of the lightweight double, and those are challenging, right? Because if I have some critique to give and it's not me, then it's probably you, right? So I think that that's a really great way to go about assessing assessing other teammates. And then you can also talk with coaches and communicate about what works for you and what is absolutely not helpful for you.
Certainly the positive framing is something that in my coaching practice I always try to bring, and I'm very conscious. We've all done that. If I say don't think about bananas, the first thing you're going to think about is bananas. So instead of saying don't, you then start talking positively about apples, and that positive approach is a definite key to success. And sometimes I write down what I want to say, realize it's negative, and then spend quite a lot of time thinking about how to turn it around to make it into a positive statement. So instead of saying don't square late, the easy thing is to say square early, or start to roll your handles as they move over your feet, or however you choose to frame it. But I really like that within your crew. I think that's a great way to go.
Yeah. And what you just said also brings up the mental toughness within a 2K. If you get to that moment where your thoughts are starting to go negative, then you really just get spiraled into that. You start to think, my legs hurt, and then you think it's never going to end. And these are all negative thoughts. And you can just get sucked into this versus like what you're saying, you have to actually tease that apart when you're not 2King, right? When you're sitting at a desk, you have to think, okay, what is it that I think about when I'm in that moment? And how do I reframe that into the positive so it's something I actually want to do? These are actionable things that I can do instead of, oh my gosh, it hurts so much, I'm never going to make it. Think, okay, I just got to get my rate up by 1 beat. All right, I'm going to get my hands quick around the catch. All right, well, now we're into positive action.
So have you ever been in a situation under pressure, where you have misjudged it and got it very wrong?
I tended to be really a control freak when I was an athlete. I think many successful rowers are. So I can't think of a moment that I like really botched it. Especially because really botching it to me was getting maybe a split and a half above what I thought I was going to get. And then even then, I don't even see that as a failure so much. I really see it as a learning opportunity. And I know that's like so cliche and everyone's rolling their eyes, but it's like, I can think of a workout I did once where I was just exhausted, and it was like 3x4K as fast as you could go, or 4x3K as fast as you could go on the erg. And it was just me and another athlete. And I went out at a pace that I would normally be able to hold. And it's like the third and fourth pieces. I was not 10 splits above, but I was definitely a handful of splits above what I had started out at. And then this was when I was an elite athlete, rowing for the US. And I didn't necessarily see that as a massive failure. Of course, I was disappointed at the time, but it's like you start to put the pieces of the puzzle together and you say, oh yeah, gosh, I trained way too much this week, and I didn't sleep well last night. And gosh, it's not a normal thing. And so then you start to work backwards and think, okay, well, next time I do one of these, I got to do X, Y, and Z to make sure that I don't have this result.
That's such a good way of approaching it. Let's end on a positive. Would you like to tell me about your best race ever? Do you have one that really comes to mind where you just go, yeah, I nailed it?
Yeah, I do. This was the race. It was 2012 in Luzern, Switzerland, the World Cup. I was racing in the lightweight double, and the US has its own set of qualification standards for the Olympics. And ours, for me and my doubles partner, was to get top 4 at any World Cup. And I should give a little context for this. So the year before, we had won the World Cup series, racing in the lightweight double. We had placed 4th at the World Championships in Slovenia in 2011. And then we decided to train together all year. We had never placed worse than 4th in the world. And we won our national race so that we could race at a World Cup. So we were the fastest in the US. We decided to do 2 World Cups to try to get this top 4 qualification standard. So we went to the first one in Serbia and we placed 6th. So that was a disappointment for us. And then it was this second World Cup. We had flights home the next day, so we were not going to stay for any more. And so we really had one last chance to do it. And we made it through the heats, we made it through the semifinals, and we ended up racing the A final. And just sitting on the line, it was such a competitive group of athletes. I think it was the same 6 from the previous World Cup, the same 6 crews. And just sitting on the line and looking down the course, I rode bow seat and setting our point and thinking, oh my gosh, I need to get to the finish line as fast as I can. This is all hinges on this. There was a massive amount of pressure there. And those are the moments that you really are able to find out about yourself as an athlete and what you're capable of. So the race was, it was really 6 boats across, at least through the 1,500-meter mark. Every time I looked over, everyone's within, I don't know, maybe a second and a half or something at each 500.
So that's a half boat length. That really isn't very much, is it?
Yeah, for 6 boats across, it was intense racing. And then I remember being at the 750-meter to go mark and thinking, I am spent. There's no way I can even make it to the finish line. I have really like sold everything to get here just to be in the field with everyone. And as an elite athlete, it's your job to know your limit and to push your limit. And so I was very familiar with being at that place, where you thought to yourself, I don't know if I can do it. And it's the difference here was that it happened so much earlier in the race, 750 meters to go, you got a while still. And so just remember going into that last 750 and saying, okay, you got to buckle up and do this if you're going to do it. And we ended up placing 4th. So by 0.09 over 5th. So we were in by just a hair. And I think, that's my best race because I had, I'm someone that likes to try to break through her own barriers. That was always what appealed to me about rowing. And at a moment where I thought I had broken through so many of the barriers already, whether it's erg testing or, pieces on the water or, world championship results or whatever, you think you have broken through the barriers and then you really get to an even bigger one and you're able to break through that. It just reminds me still to this day that whatever you think is the limit is definitely not the limit. It's not even close.
I've heard it said that some elite athletes do exactly what you've described, break through a barrier, have a great achievement, and then find that they've really frightened themselves about what it felt like on the far side of that barrier. Have you ever been confronted with that? I'm really not sure I want to feel like that ever again.
Yeah. I'm not sure that I have been in, I don't even know if it's fear that you're describing. It's more uncertain feeling about that. I don't know that I've ever had that. It's more been a question of, I don't know how I did that. And I don't know if I can repeat that, right? I've got to be in a really, like I mentioned, I was like a control freak, right? Like many elite athletes are, and trying to get your pre-race stuff all the same and then get your, all of your racing gear together and arrive at the certain time and all these things. And then, you've got to have everything right if you're going to hit it like that on one specific day, one specific race. And even in a moment in a specific race, it comes down to just fractions. And so I think that was more if there was to be something that I kind of was unsure about after a performance like that, that's more what it was.
Wow. Kristin, it's been an absolute delight having you as a guest on Rowing Chat. Now, you have some special goodies for our listeners.
Yes. So there's a website on the page here, kristinhedstrom.com/2K. And that's where you can get a free 2K checklist. And so this is a checklist that I put together based on my years of pulling 2K erg tests for things that you should make sure you do in the days leading up to the race. And then, the morning of the race, it includes what workout I do the day before the race, so that it really walks you through it's learning some things, what you can do, just some easy wins as far as 2K erg testing. The goal was to create this resource, this free resource, so that you could get on the erg for your next 2K and feel like you could go faster just by reading the things on the checklist.
Well, thank you very much. That was really generous. And I will put that link in the show notes if people didn't write it down. And so that free resource checklist for your next 2K. Kristin, tell the listeners where they can connect with you online.
Yeah, the best place to start is kristinhedstrom.com. You'll see on that I do, I've got kind of two separate sections of my website. If you go to the top and click on rowers, that's where you're going to find all the resources for rowers. I do a one-on-one 4-week coaching package with rowers where we work together. Each week is dedicated to a different thing. So first week is 2K planning and 2K testing. Second week is mental toughness. Third week is nutrition. And fourth week is choose your own. Love doing that with athletes. It's so beneficial and really just such a joy for me. You can also find training plans on the website there. So that's really the hub. Then you follow me on Instagram at Kristin Hedstrom. And yeah, I think those are probably the two best places. I'll keep it narrow for people.
That's fantastic. And Kristin, thank you so much for giving us your time and coming on Rowing Chat with me.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. It's been a pleasure.
Now, to all the rest of our listeners, please send me your rowing retailer recommendations. I really want to get these products. So I need just a web link to your favorite rowing product. Send it through to me at rowing.chat, which is our website. And till next time on Rowing Chat, thanks for listening. Bye-bye.